Well, businesses will be subject to new rules to increase cybersecurity measures and protect Australians from malicious online attacks. The Critical Infrastructure Risk Management Program will provide regulatory frameworks to ensure businesses provide annual risk management reports to Commonwealth agencies. It's a very convoluted way of saying that businesses are going to send a report on risk once a year to government agencies. That might be clearer. The push comes after recent Medibank and Optus cyber hacks, and in the wake of revelations, the Chinese Communist Party has attempted to undermine Canada's election in 2021. The Home Affairs Minister fired a warning shot to foreign powers, vowing swift action against any attempts by foreign governments to influence our democracy. Well, let's bring in the Manager of Opposition Business, Paul Fletcher. Paul, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So let's take the top part of that VO first. So now, basically, this is in response to, as you know, Optus and Medicare. Companies, board directors to give annual risk reports to governments to try and stop a repeat of those attacks. So is this something you support? What do you make of it?
Well, let's be clear. This reminds us of one of Claire O'Neill's less glorious moments early on as Minister for Home Affairs, when there were obviously serious cyber attacks against both Optus and Medibank Private. Claire O'Neill at the time said, she didn't have the powers to deal with it. In fact, there are very extensive powers that the Home Affairs Minister has. Under a whole range of legislation we introduced, including the security of critical infrastructure obligations, the Home Affairs Minister has very extensive powers, including, in the most extreme cases, she has the power to step in to a business. So there are very extensive powers that she already has. We've not seen the details. Of course, these are important issues and we'll look at them on the merits. But the point I make is we had a big focus on this in government. There were very extensive powers provided to the Minister for Home Affairs across 11 different sectors, ports, banking, telecommunications, a whole range of sectors. So part of this undoubtedly is going to be a bit of political management on the part of Claire O'Neill because she mishandled what happened last week.
I mean, like you said there, hacking involves businesses across so many sectors, including media companies as well, brings in your portfolio too. I mean, what more can be done?
Well, one important point here, Pete, is that we did a lot of work on what we called the Trusted Digital Identity Framework. The underlying problem with hacking of businesses is that businesses store a lot of your personal information and my personal information. Name, address, driver's licence, etc. If instead we could establish our identity digitally, where each of us had a so-called trusted digital identity provider, so when I go to open a new account with, for example, Optus or Telstra, they'd get a digital certificate from my digital security, trusted digital identity provider.
Can't that be hacked though?
No, well, there's been a lot of work done on this to get around these problems. One of the advantages of that system would be that in this case, Telstra or Optus or the bank would not keep a whole lot of detailed personal information about you or me. It would have received the digital certificate that would simply verify I was who I was claiming to be. Long-winded way of saying, we did a lot of work on this in government. We released an exposure draft of legislation. MyGov ID is in place already for when you deal with the federal government. But if that legislation were to be taken up by the present government, and they've sat on it, they've not done very much about it at all, what that would allow is private sector businesses to also use that when dealing with their customers. Right. So the point I make is the trusted digital identity can be a major part of dealing with what is a serious issue with hacking.
What about, I mean, remembering last year that the companies involved, Medibank, Optus, they were heavily criticised for their response to it. We're looking at $10,000 fines here, potentially, according to Claire O'Neill, the report out this morning. That seems a snip for a multi-billion-dollar company who didn't comply.
We've been clear that if there are remedies proposed that involve tougher fines, and that might be under the privacy measures that are being taken for by the Attorney General or potentially under other frameworks. We're certainly open to that. At the same time, what's important is that when companies suffer a serious attack, they've got the right incentives to report it immediately to the authorities, for example, the Australian Cyber Security Centre. And so all of this needs to be considered holistically. So to the extent that Claire O'Neill is talking about working more closely with businesses, that is to be welcomed. But the point I make is we did a lot in this space. We set up arrangements with strong new powers for the Home Affairs Minister. We provided lots of additional funding for organisations like the Australian Cyber Security Centre, the Australian Signals Directorate. This is a continuing challenge for governments and societies in the digital era. But I would say watch closely as to what Claire O'Neill's announcing. We'll see how much of it is new. I suspect there's a bit of window.
Okay, just a final one here on Jim Chalmers yesterday, the announcement on super. He is going after tax breaks, some generous tax breaks when it comes to superannuation, the industry itself. Bearing in mind that there are a lot of people sending millions of dollars into superannuation accounts at a smaller tax rate, is there room to tighten, which is what he's
look, this is all code for tax increases. Jim Chalmers is looking to raise taxes wherever he can. We've got a big spending, big taxing Labor government. And of course, what Labor doesn't want to recognise is that superannuation money is the members' money. They own it. The superannuation, big super funds, the big industry super funds, stacked with union-appointed directors, want to keep as much money as possible to get management fees on it. They didn't like the idea that we took to the last election that people should be able to draw on their super balance as a deposit for a home. But it's an idea that Australians support, and it's certainly something we'll be continuing to take forward.
Is he opening up a class warfare here?
What he's opening up is yet more attempts to try and raise tax in whatever ways he can, and he's once again dancing to the tune of the big industry super funds. What we're concerned about is allowing Australians, for example, to have the opportunity to use their money to contribute towards a deposit on a home, the policy we took to the last election. And what we're also very concerned about is highlighting the risk of increased taxes, and it's clear that Jim Chalmers has big ambitions to raise taxes.
Paul Fletcher, we'll leave it there. Appreciate your time, though. We'll talk to you soon.